Good morning, campers. I'm Ian Brand, and we were asked to record a video about wines in Monterey and do a little tasting and talking about what we love about the area. So I drew a pretty picture. Those aren't dinosaur teeth, those are mountains, but they can be dinosaur teeth if you like. This is a picture of the coastline, and I want to talk a little bit about what makes growing wine in Monterey special. The big thing is this big thing right here. That's the Pacific Ocean. It's cold. It's a little warmer now. You can get away with a 3-2 now and then, but it's usually hanging out around 56, 58 degrees. And then the second piece is this thing right here. That's the opening of the Salinas Valley. It's 20, 25 miles across. And the Salinas Valley runs all the way down to Paso Robles. We're around the 37th parallel, so it's sunny, it gets real warm inland, and when hot air rises, it draws in wind off the ocean. Now you hear a lot about wind gaps in California and how that keeps things temperate. Most wind gaps are like 1,500 foot high or 800 foot high passes, maybe a couple miles across. We don't really have a wind gap, we have a wind tunnel. So we've got a 100-mile long valley with a 20-mile wide access point, and then right here, one of the deepest marine canyons in the world, one of the 4 deepest marine canyons on the west coast, feeding right into the mouth of the valley, which means a lot of cold water and a lot of cold air. It's reasonable to think of Monterey County and the Salinas Valley as the most temperate wine growing region in the world. And what that translates to is lots of sunshine, long hang time, and lots of acid. So when looking at wines, especially in the Salinas Valley, and to give you some context, this would be like the San Lucia Highlands right here, and like Arroyo Seco here. You're looking at acidity, you're looking at minerality, you're looking at aromatics, freshness, salinity. And so I particularly like white wines in the Salinas Valley. That's kind of what I go for. And so I brought a couple of white wines from our current releases to talk about today with you. But first, a little bit about us. We started our winery about 12 years ago. 2008, we moved down to Salinas and began making wine here. Floundered for a while, tried making some California-style wines, which are not very effective around here. And over time and experimentation, really came upon a set of flavors and a style of winemaking that really, I think, works for the local area. And it's been all peaches and roses since then. So without further ado, come to my lounge. This is like Mr. Rogers. I am disappointed I didn't bring a sweater today. I'd feel much better if I had a sweater. Take my shoes off for a second. So here we have, first off, our La Maria Albarino. This has been one of our most popular wines. This has been one of the most eye-opening wines for us. It comes from a vineyard, a rather inauspicious looking vineyard on a bench off the side of the highway near Greenfield, which is fairly inland for Albarino, but the consistent ocean breezes really keep it moderated and temperate. And then it grows on something called chalk rock, which is a calcareous siliceous sandstone shale. One of 2 really quality wine growing soils in Monterey County, the other being a high iron oxide granite that you find a lot on the east side of the valley, and variations of granite that you find a lot in the San Lucia Highlands and in the Arroyo Seco area, lower Arroyo Seco. So that calcareous element gives it a lot of breadth on the palate, almost a Chablisienne texture, which is really neat to see in Albarino. We do it in 2 picks. The first pick, we do a direct press, whole cluster into tank, sell it for 2 days, rack off lees, and into the other tank. We do a pied de cuve in the vineyard, meaning we start yeast 7 days before. We pick in the vineyard to harvest yeast in their natural environment. So when we're doing a native yeast, we're not doing the native yeast to our facility, which is in Salinas, but we do yeasts that are actually native on the grapes and in the vineyard. And then the second pick, we pick usually 2 to 3 days later, and we will destem and crush that, and then leave that on its skins for 2 to 3 days. And by resting on skins, you pick up more of the aromatic compounds, the terpenes. You get a little bit more texture and depth in the mouth, and that's kind of the secret sauce. That's what really sets off the first element. It's a very aromatic wine for us, partially because after we ferment it colder, and then we leave it in the tank, not racking, not touching it, just shutting the tank down, topping it off, and chilling it down to arrest the secondary fermentation. And it'll rest in the tank for about 3 months, and then prep for bottle and into the bottle. The 19 vintage was the lowest acid vintage that I've ever seen in the Salinas Valley, which meant that we were a high acid wine for California. Usually we have screaming acids in our Salinas Valley white wines, which leads people to argue with me that I'm not making this in California. I must be adding acid. No, if you're adding acid in the Salinas Valley, like, I don't know what you're doing. So very aromatic: peaches, guavas, stone fruits, peach flower, melon. And then on the palate, it's clean, a little lemon zest. Let's check myself, see how good I am. I always hated writing tasting notes because you taste kind of what you're thinking about. From a winemaker's perspective, it's like, is it clean? Is it composed? Is it balanced? Does it smell good? How's the finish? How long's the finish? And as long as you're hitting all those points, like, this smells like cassis. I don't know. Doesn't do anything for me. So yeah, we're getting a lot of melon, a lot of kind of honeydew this year, guava, more tropical in 2019 than past years. But yeah, beautiful wine, pairs well with lots of different things. It's amazing what Albarino can play with, and especially, the Salinas Valley is this great agricultural hub. It grows a lot of leafy greens, brassicas, asparagus, shout out to the caracholes. And there are very few wines or artichokes that can pair with those types of foods, in addition to the seaweed off the coast. But one of the great benefits of this Albarino is it will match up with some of your most difficult flavors. Really special wine for us, one that was really happy to make. The way that it came about is what we talked about earlier. When we were first, 2010 was a really pivotal vintage for us, and I think for California winemakers in general, because we were cruising around in the 2000s. We were still on the tail end of parkerization, making things big and fruity. And then came the coldest pair of vintages that anyone could remember. And so if you were waiting for flavor in those years, you were waiting. Probably not ever really getting there. You're kind of forced to make wine with a different set of ideas. And in that different set of ideas, I certainly discovered all kinds of different ways to make wine than what I had learned. And the confidence to step away from that kind of Northern California ideal into something more befitting our windy, rocky, and temperate Central Coast. The second wine I want to look at would be the Escole Chardonnay. And I already shouted out the Caracholi family, but I'm going to do it again. The Escole Chardonnay goes under our I-brand label. These are our single vineyard wines. Comes off the northern end of the San Lucia Islands. It's a vineyard that's a little higher than, but borders the south side, the Sleepy Hollow vineyard. Before they pulled out the older vines there and moved to a bunch of Dijon and other stuff that doesn't really belong on the Central Coast. The Sleepy Hollow Chardonnay was one of the premier Chardonnays, I think, in the Central Coast in California. And there might be a bit of that left. The Caracholes put the vineyard in 2008 or 2009. In 2015, which was a drought year, another year that we really figured out some different things around wine, because with the extreme drought, we started seeing some vines shut down real early. And so you had to work with a different set of flavors. Scott started dry farming the vines during the summer. In 2016, he called me up and said, Ian, I want you to take some of the Chardonnay. I want you to check it out. I said, Scott, I don't need any more Chardonnay in my life. For reference, Monterey County is the second largest grape acreage in California, second to Sonoma County and ahead of Napa. Of that grape acreage, over 1/3 is Chardonnay. There's a lot of Chardonnay down here, and for good reason. Chardonnay performs great. So I got Chardonnay coming out of my ears. So I didn't really want to take some, but Scott can be persuasive. And we brought it in, and it was pretty damn incredible. We're working with the Hyde and Robert Young clones. They tend to be acid hogs, and then with the dry farming during the season, the balance that you ripen at changes. You tend to have more depth and expressiveness and intensity of acid, and less like fruit flavors being driven by healthy canopy growth. And so it was this really neat, like tight, taut, expressive wine. We ran it for 11 months in 50% new oak, which is a lot of oak for us. I mean, I only buy like 10 barrels a year out of all our production. And then racked it off into stainless steel for 5 or 6 months, mostly because I had heard a podcast where someone else had done that in Burgundy, and they said it was the way to do it. So I was like, sweet, I'm gonna do that. Yeah, it was a lot of research. And it worked great. I mean, it was pretty goddamn incredible. So we've continued doing that. We've honed a little bit in terms of picking times and terms of the blocks we use. But we're still working kind of on that same formula. So our current release just came out as a 2018. And it's gorgeous. It's got a lot of citrus flower and the vanillin from the oak. Got the lemon zest and the wet flint from the granite soils. It's super light on the palate, almost like a little bit of lemon cream, and then has this extremely extended, persistent finish, really cleansing acidity. Really points to everything that I think makes Monterey Chardonnay special. The ability to have that lightness and that airiness, and that almost the sensation of sea air going across your tongue, and then to finish with that that elegance and that extension. The ability to not be overly brash in the glass, but to stand up to all types of foods and intense foods. That kind of subtlety intact. And that's, those things are what makes working out of Monterey County and the Salinas Valley especially special to me.